Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I want to talk to you about something that matters more than most of us realize. You don't need a lab coat to think like a scientist. Before we begin, I want you to do something simple. Think about how many people you passed on your way here today, on the sidewalk, in traffic, in a hallway, on your phone. Now, here's the part we don't see. Every 2 seconds, one of those people somewhere in the world loses their home. That's 30 people a minute. One in every 67 people on the planet. Right now, more than 120 million human beings are forcibly displaced. That number includes about 43 million refugees who have crossed an international border, roughly 68 million internally displaced people who have fled their homes but remain inside their own country, and more than 4 million stateless people no nation legally recognizes or protects. More than half of all forcibly displaced people are children. By the time I finish this talk, another 450 people will have lost everything familiar. And here's the uncomfortable truth. In many cases, the data already told us it was coming. When COVID-19 arrived, did you feel overwhelmed by how much science you were suddenly expected to understand? What was true? What was false? How to trust? What to trust? Who to trust? How to keep yourself and your family safe? You weren't imagining it. During the pandemic, more than 70% of adults reported feeling confused or overwhelmed by scientific information. That discomfort, that mental fog, is what happens when science feels distant, exclusive, like it belongs to someone else. False information spread faster than verified data. Fear filled the gaps where clarity should have been. COVID taught us something we can't unlearn. Science is no longer optional. And for me, this isn't abstract. Science showed up in my life before I had a choice. My parents spent years going through IVF to have me, years of injections, failed cycles, hope, grief, starting over. Long before science was political or controversial, science was the reason I exist. I was born with congenital nystagmus. My eyes have never held still. The world has always been slightly out of focus. As an infant, I also had seizures. Doctors warned my parents I might regress, that I might not develop normally. Before I had language, before I had agency, science didn't just shape my life, it gave me one. Growing up, my difference made me visible in ways children rarely forgive. So I learned to speak the language people respected. It's neurological. It's involuntary. It doesn't affect my intelligence. Science became my translator, not to make me exceptional, but to make me safe. And yet, when I reached for science myself, I was told something else. Women don't become scientists. They marry them. I was told I would not amount to anything. So I walked away. But my relationship with science didn't just begin with me. Hundreds of years ago, my family were Jews in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. More than 150,000 people were prosecuted. Thousands were executed. Tens of thousands fled. Survival required observation, adaptation, and knowing when danger was real. That's science in its earliest form. In 1847, generations later, my family boarded a ship called the Phoenix, sailing across Lake Michigan. There were 300 passengers. Only 45 survived. When the ship began to fail, there was no engine, no radio, No rescue coming. One of my ancestors rode with a broom. He bailed water with a wooden shoe. He kept people safe long enough to reach shore. That wasn't luck. That was applied physics, endurance, and problem solving under impossible conditions. Later, another generation survived because one person was a carpenter and a surgeon. With his hands, he built hospitals, and with those same hands, he treated patients during a plague outbreak. At the time, 30 to 50% of patients died, and many physicians died too, because Louis Pasteur's germ theory was still debated. Science had not yet caught up to courage. He died serving medicine anyway. And then there was my grandmother, a nurse, a healer. When the Japanese invaded China, she fled, pregnant with my father and carrying 3 small children. They were evacuated by the Flying Tigers. Pregnant women fleeing conflict face 3 to 5 times higher maternal mortality. Children born as refugees are more likely to experience chronic illness, disrupted development, and trauma that echoes across generations. Science didn't make her life easy. It made it possible. And that echo lives in me. I didn't just inherit this history, though. I recognize it. In the 1990s, a childhood friend of mine was killed at 16 during the Bosnian genocide in Yugoslavia. 16. Old enough to dream. 16. Too young to be remembered as anything but a statistic. More than 100,000 people were killed. 2 million were displaced. 1 in 3 victims was a child. The warning signs were there. The data existed. The world hesitated anyway. And this isn't just history. Rwanda, Darfur, Myanmar, Ukraine, Iran, different names, same pattern. I have friends in Ukraine. Missiles landed 4 kilometers from where they live. 4 kilometers. Close enough to feel the shockwave. 4 kilometers. Close enough to wonder which night will be the last. Once again, the possibility of losing someone I know to mass violence feels heartbreakingly real. I also have friends and colleagues in Iran, people I care about deeply, living under conditions where survival is uncertain and truth is contested. Internet blackouts, closed courts, no cameras, no witnesses, chemical weapons. The latest estimates emerging from inside Iran show 43,000 people have been killed, 10,000 people have been blinded, and more than 350,000 people have been injured. Hospitals, places meant for healing, have become places people fear. Doctors are working without supplies, and people are bleeding out at home because seeking care or giving care can mean arrest or worse. This is what mass violence looks like before mass graves. Genocide doesn't begin with bodies. It begins when evidence is ignored. And when evidence is ignored, the truth itself becomes a casualty. This is what brought me back to science. Because science, data, surveillance, epidemiology, documentation can expose patterns early, preserve truth, guide humanitarian response, and save lives before killing becomes undeniable. In the 1800s, surgery killed nearly half of all patients. Not from injury, from infection. Doctors didn't wash their hands. Instruments were not sterilized. Then Joseph Lister asked a dangerous question. What if infection isn't inevitable? He was mocked, dismissed, and surgeons literally walked out on his lectures. But when antiseptic practices were adopted, surgical deaths dropped by more than 60%. Around the same time, Louis Pasteur challenged the belief that disease came from bad air. Invisible organisms, they said, were imaginary. His work led to pasteurization, vaccines, and public health practices that now save millions of lives every year. I keep pictures of Lister and Pasteur on my desk, not as decoration, but as a reminder that when you're standing alone, when people roll their eyes, when the truth is inconvenient, persistence can outlive ridicule, and courage and curiosity can change the world. A scientist is not defined by a lab coat or a title or a flawless path. A scientist asks, how do we know this? Who's missing from the data? What happens if we look closer? I carry eyes that never fully focus, a life made possible by IVF, the courage of refugees, the memory of lives lost when evidence was ignored, and I stand here anyway. If you've ever been told you don't belong, science did not reject you, people did. And people can be wrong. You don't need permission. You don't need perfection. You don't need a lab coat. You just need curiosity. As Louis Pasteur said, science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity, and it is the torch which illuminates the world.